My name is Diane, and I'm turning 60 today, a number that feels both heavy and fragile, like porcelain holding the years of laughter, heartbreak, and quiet endurance. I never imagined my 60th birthday would begin with my heart swinging between disbelief and joy, between the comfort of being loved and the ache of uncertainty that always seems to wait beneath happiness. Yesterday morning, my son Marcus called me. His voice carried that restless energy he's had since he was a boy, half excitement, half mystery. "Mom, happy early birthday," he said, his words rushing as if afraid to lose the surprise before it landed. "I have something special for you. I bought you a Seaside Mansion." For a long second, I couldn't even breathe. I laughed, the kind of laugh that's really a gasp. "Marcus, that's too much." "Sweetheart, you don't need to. Nothing's too much for you, Mom," he interrupted gently. His tone softened, like when he was small and wanted me to believe in his plans. "Tomorrow I'll take you to see it. It's yours. All yours. Just pack an overnight bag. You're going to love it." That night, I barely slept. I kept turning in bed, the moonlight crawling across the floor, my mind wandering through every possibility. I thought about how Marcus had struggled after his father's death, how he'd grown into a man who carried both strength and sadness. Maybe this gift was his way of giving back what he felt I had lost. I felt a mix of gratitude so deep it hurt, and disbelief so sharp it almost felt like fear. When morning came, I wore my favorite blue dress. The one my late husband used to say made my eyes look like the sea before a storm. Marcus arrived at 9, his smile boyish, the same one that used to melt me when he'd come home from school with muddy shoes and a guilty grin. "Ready, Mom?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, my voice trembling. The drive took 2 hours. The road curved along the coast, sunlight winking through pine trees and spilling over cliffs. Marcus played music softly, the kind of mellow jazz he knew I loved. We talked about everything and nothing, the garden I'd let overgrow, the way city life felt smaller each year, the quiet hope of starting fresh. When we finally turned down a long gravel driveway, my heart leapt. There it was, a white mansion with tall columns, its windows glinting like eyes open to the sea. The ocean stretched endlessly behind it, silver blue and alive. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. "This is mine?" I whispered. Marcus nodded, smiling wide. "All yours, Mom. The deed's in your name." I covered my mouth, tears spilling before I could stop them. "You did all this for me?" He shrugged, pretending to brush it off, but I saw the emotion flicker across his face. "You've done everything for me. It's time I do something for you." He handed me a small, ornate key. The metal felt warm from his hand. But before I could fit it into the lock, I noticed something strange. The door was already slightly ajar. A pulse of unease went through me. From inside came faint music and laughter. Marcus frowned. "That's odd." I told the realtor to leave it empty today. We exchanged a look. I pushed the door open, suitcase in hand, and stepped inside. The smell of food hit me first, garlic, oil, and something frying. Then came the sound of clinking dishes, laughter, and voices I didn't recognize. My heart began to pound. In the middle of the living room, my new living room, sat a group of people, sprawled across the cream sofas and floor cushions. There were plates everywhere, open wine bottles, a half-eaten cake on the coffee table. For a second, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. Then I recognized them Rebecca's family. Patricia, her mother, lounged on the sofa, shoes on the cushions, phone in hand. Her brother Derek stood by the fridge, eating straight from a container. Rebecca appeared from the hallway, wearing shorts and a smug expression, like she owned the place. Hello?" I managed, forcing politeness through confusion. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" She crossed her arms, her tone dripping with disdain. "This is our house. You can't just walk in." Her words hit me like a slap. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Then came the laughter from Patricia, from Derek. Cruel, casual laughter that burned in my ears. Marcus froze beside me. His expression shifted from confusion to something darker. "What did you just say to my mother?" The room fell silent. Even the music seemed to fade. Rebecca's smirk faltered. "Baby, there's a misunderstanding. Did you tell my mother to leave her house?" Marcus's voice was low, controlled, but his eyes blazed. Patricia sat up quickly, trying to diffuse the tension. "Marcus, darling, let's all calm down." He stepped forward. "There's nothing to calm down. This house belongs to my mother. The deed is in her name." Rebecca looked at me with open contempt. "You told me you bought this house for us." "I said I made an investment," Marcus snapped. "A birthday surprise for someone special." Her face twisted, anger replacing charm. "You spent $425,000 on your mother. That's our money." "It's not," he said firmly. "It's my inheritance and my savings from before we were married." "You have no claim." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. I could feel my pulse in my temples. My fingers dug into the suitcase handle. I wanted to disappear, yet something deep inside, something I hadn't felt in years, rose like a tide. "How long have you been here?" I asked quietly. Patricia waved a dismissive hand. "Just 3 days, dear. Rebecca said we could use the beach house for a little vacation." "A vacation in my house?" I asked, voice trembling but steady. Rebecca sneered. "Please, Diane, be grateful Marcus even thinks about you. That did it." Years of swallowing pain, of keeping peace, of choosing silence to avoid conflict, all of it cracked. "Most wives," I said, meeting her eyes, "wouldn't throw out their husband's mother on her birthday." Marcus's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police. You're trespassing." Patricia shot up. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," he said, dialing. Rebecca's mask slipped completely then. Her voice turned sharp, desperate. "Fine, we'll leave. But this isn't over." "It is," Marcus said coldly. "Out, all of you." They shuffled toward the door. Rebecca paused on the threshold, turned to me, and hissed, "You've always been in the way." Marcus didn't let her finish. "That's enough." The door slammed, leaving only the sound of waves and my own uneven breathing. I sank onto the sofa, and felt the exhaustion of years settle into my bones. Marcus knelt beside me, eyes full of regret. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I told her I bought you a house but didn't give her the address. She must have gone through my phone. It's not your fault," I said softly, though my voice trembled. "It is," he whispered. "I married her." His phone buzzed. He read a message and went pale. "Mom, you need to see this." He handed me the screen, a chat between Rebecca and Patricia. "Marcus is taking the old lady to see the house. Once we establish we've been living here, we can claim rights. She's not getting this house." Patricia replied, "Perfect. Once she's gone, everything goes to Marcus. Then it's ours." The air felt colder. "Who sent you this?" I asked. "No idea," Marcus said, "but I found more on her iPad." He showed me months of messages Rebecca and Patricia mocking me, calculating what they'd gain after I died, calling me the waiting game. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from fury so clean it felt like clarity. "Marcus," I said, "steady now. We need more than the police." "Who?" he asked. "A lawyer," I said. "A very good lawyer." He blinked. "Do you have someone in mind?" "Yes," I said. "Jennifer Life family and financial crimes. Rose's daughter connected us last year." He exhaled shakily. "Call her." I did. My hands stopped trembling. Something inside me, something long dormant, awoke. I had been hurt, humiliated, underestimated, but that moment marked the end of it. I was no longer. The moment Marcus stepped forward, I could feel the air shift. His body tensed like a wall between me and Rebecca. His jaw set, his shoulders squared, not in aggression, but in something far more fragile. Protection. "Did you tell my mother to leave her house?" he asked, his voice quiet but trembling at the edges. Rebecca froze. The confidence she wore like perfume began to evaporate. "Baby, there's a misunderstanding," she said, forcing a little laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I thought." "You thought what?" Marcus snapped. His voice cracked, the sound of a man betrayed. "That I bought this house for you?" Patricia rose from the sofa, smoothing her floral blouse like she was preparing for a performance. "Marcus, darling," she began in her sugary tone, "let's all calm down before this gets ugly." "There's nothing to calm down," Marcus interrupted, his tone colder than I'd ever heard it. "This house belongs to my mother. The deed is in her name. I told you yesterday it was a birthday surprise." Rebecca's face changed in slow motion. The smooth charm she wielded so easily hardened into fury. "But you said you bought a beach house, an investment in our future." "I said I made an investment," he corrected sharply. "A birthday surprise for someone special." My heart was hammering against my ribs. It wasn't just anger. It was disbelief that I'd allowed this woman into our lives, trusted her with my son's heart. I had always known Rebecca's smile had edges, but I told myself Marcus was happy, and that was enough. I had convinced myself of that lie for years. Rebecca grabbed his arm. "You spent $425,000 on your mother. That's our money." Marcus shook her off. "No," he said, each word sharp and deliberate. "It's my inheritance from Dad and my own savings from before we married. You have no claim to it." The room went still, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the faraway crash of the sea. Derek, who had been eating a sandwich like nothing was happening, finally looked up, mouth half full. "Wait, so we weren't supposed to be here? How long have you been here?" I asked quietly, though I already sensed the answer would hurt. Patricia waved her manicured hand as if brushing away an inconvenience. "Just 3 days, dear. Rebecca said we could use the beach house for a little vacation, nothing serious." I swallowed hard, my voice barely above a whisper. "A vacation in my house?" Rebecca's eyes flicked toward me, her smirk cruel. "Please, Diane, be grateful. Marcus even thinks about you. Most sons wouldn't bother." Her words sliced deeper than I expected. For years, I had told myself that her coldness was insecurity, that if I only gave her kindness, she'd soften. But in that moment, I saw the truth. She mistook compassion for weakness. I met her gaze. Most wives wouldn't throw out their husband's mother on her birthday. Marcus turned toward her then, eyes burning. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police. You're trespassing." Patricia gasped, scandalized. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," he said, already dialing. Rebecca's mask cracked. "Fine," she hissed. "We'll leave, but this isn't over." "It is," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. "Out, all of you." They gathered their things in silence, muttering under their breath. When Rebecca reached the doorway, she turned and leaned close, her voice low and poisonous. "You've always been in the way." "That's enough," Marcus said, pushing the door shut behind them. The sound echoed through the empty halls like the end of a storm. Silence filled the house. Only the ocean remained, its steady rhythm grounding me as my thoughts spun. I sat down heavily on the sofa, and felt the exhaustion of the day crash over me. Marcus knelt beside me, his hands trembling. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I told Rebecca I bought you a house, but didn't give her the address. She must have gone through my phone or paperwork. How did she find it?" I asked softly. His face darkened. "She's been secretive lately. Passwords changed, messages hidden. I thought she was planning something for my birthday. I didn't think she'd do this." I touched his cheek gently, the same way I did when he was a boy and came home scraped and ashamed after a fight. "It's not your fault, Marcus." He shook his head. "It is. I married her. I ignored the signs. His voice cracked. I brought her into your life. Before I could speak, his phone buzzed again. The light from the screen painted his face pale. He frowned, then went completely still. Mom, he said quietly, you need to see this. He handed me the phone. My hands shook as I read. A screenshot Rebecca's messages to Patricia. Marcus is taking the old lady to see the house. Once we establish we've been living here, we can claim rights or at least negotiate. She's not getting this house. Patricia had replied, perfect. Once she's gone, everything goes to Marcus. Then it's ours. The room felt colder. Who sent you this? I asked. I don't know, he whispered. It came from an anonymous number. He hesitated, then opened another folder of messages. I found these on Rebecca's iPad. I've been trying to figure out what to do. I scrolled through them, weeks and months of conversations between Rebecca and Patricia. My name appeared over and over. Their tone was casual, almost bored as they plotted around my death. She's 60, high blood pressure. Maybe nature will take its course. Once she's gone, Marcus will have everything. We just have to be patient. The waiting game, one message read, followed by laughing emojis. The room tilted slightly. For a moment, the sound of the waves became a roar in my ears. I wanted to collapse into grief, to cry until I felt empty. But something inside me, something fierce and sharp that had slept for years, refused. I steadied my breath. Marcus, I said, my voice low but steady, we need more than the police. He looked at me, startled. Who? Then? A lawyer, I said, a very good lawyer. He stared at me as if seeing me for the first, not just as his mother, but as a woman reclaiming her strength. Do you have someone in mind? I nodded slowly. Yes, Jennifer Lee Family and Financial Crimes. Rosa's daughter from the old neighborhood connected us last year. She's smart, compassionate, and relentless. I'll call her now. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Call her. I reached for my phone, my hand finally steady. For years, I had allowed life to happen to me, to accept loss, betrayal, even cruelty, with grace because that was what I believed good women did. But grace without boundaries only breeds wounds. As I spoke to Jennifer's assistant, giving her the details, I felt something shift deep in my chest. It wasn't just anger, it was awakening. When I hung up, Marcus was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen since he was a child. "Ah, you're calm," he said softly, almost in disbelief. "I've lived through worse storms," I told him, "but this time, I'm not letting the tide carry me. I'm swimming." He swallowed, his eyes bright with emotion. "You're stronger than anyone I know." I smiled faintly, my voice gentle. "No, Marcus. I'm just done being small." The ocean outside seemed to echo my words, endless, fierce, untamed. In its reflection, I saw myself not as a woman broken by betrayal, but as one finally learning to rise from it. That night, as the waves whispered against the shore, I realized that this was no longer just about property or money. It was about reclaiming dignity, truth, and the kind of peace that comes only after everything false has burned away. I closed my eyes and whispered into the silence. This isn't the... Jennifer arrived that afternoon as the sky dimmed into a bruised gray, her small frame carrying an air of calm command. She moved with quiet certainty, the kind that makes chaos pause just long enough to listen. Her leather briefcase clicked open on the table, papers and a recorder already prepared. "First, we secure the record," she said, her voice steady and deliberate. "Then we act." I watched her with silent gratitude. Something about her presence steadied the air the way she scanned every corner, every detail of the room, as if each object might one day need to speak on my behalf. She photographed the door where Rebecca had stood, the coffee cup still on the counter, the indentations on the couch where Patricia had lounged as if she owned it. Each image was a quiet testament. This was my house, and this moment, as humiliating as it was, would not disappear unrecorded. Through the window, Rebecca and her family still lingered in the driveway, arguing. Their voices, sharp and self-centered, carried through the sea breeze. Jennifer straightened her blazer, glanced at me, and said softly, "Would you like me to handle this?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to hide behind her authority, to let someone else speak for me after so many years of swallowing my own truth. But another part, a newly awakened one, wanted to stand in it myself. I followed her outside. The ocean wind was colder than before, whipping my hair across my face as I looked at Rebecca. I no longer saw the woman my son had fallen in love with, the polite smiles at dinners, the empty compliments. I saw calculation, a quiet cruelty I had chosen not to see. "How long have you been waiting for me to die?" I asked. The question fell like a stone. Rebecca's painted lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes darted to Marcus, then back to me. "Diane, those messages were out of context." "The context seems clear," I said. My voice surprised me. It was low, unwavering. There was no anger in it, just clarity. Marcus stepped forward, his shoulders squared, but his hands trembled slightly. "I want you out, Rebecca. Take your family and leave. Now." Derek puffed his chest like a boy trying to fill a man's shadow. "You can't kick us out. We've been here 3 days." Jennifer raised her phone, the screen glowing like a silent witness. "You've been trespassing for 3 days," she said coolly. "We can call the police, or you can leave voluntarily." Rebecca's face flushed red, her confidence unraveling thread by thread. Patricia muttered something about respect and family, but even she seemed to know the battle was lost. They packed hastily, Rebecca shouting, Derek slamming doors, Patricia crying into a handkerchief she likely carried for such performances. Before leaving, Patricia turned at the doorway, her voice soft and venomous. "Divorce is messy, Marcus. Think carefully." Marcus didn't flinch. "Not as expensive as staying married to someone planning my mother's funeral." The silence that followed was a wound and a relief all at once. The door closed behind them with a finality that felt like an exorcism. The house, my house, exhaled. I sat on the couch, my legs shaking. The tension that had held me upright all day suddenly left my body. Marcus knelt beside me, his face pale and eyes wet. "I didn't know until I saw the texts," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't know how deep it went." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked softly. It wasn't an accusation, it was grief speaking through confusion. "I wanted you to have one perfect day," he whispered. "Just one." I reached for his hand. His palm was warm, trembling, the same hand I had held through fevers, heartbreaks, and graduations. There was still that boy inside him, the one who used to climb into my bed after nightmares. I felt his guilt like it was my own. Jennifer cleared her throat gently, grounding us again in reality. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but there's more. During intake, I reviewed the financials Marcus sent over. I noticed discrepancies." She placed a folder on the table. Rows of numbers and transfers stared back at us like coded betrayals. $180,000, she said, transferred to an account under Patricia's name over the last 2 years. Marcus blinked, stunned. That's almost everything I saved. I thought Rebecca was managing some of the accounts while I worked long hours. Jennifer's expression softened but remained professional. "It gets worse. That money was used to buy into a timeshare scheme now under federal investigation. If her name is on any of the documents, she could face serious consequences, but so could you if we don't act quickly." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The betrayal was no longer personal. It was systemic. They hadn't just used me. They had hollowed out my son's life, his security, his faith in love. "What do we do now?" I asked finally. My voice sounded different, calmer, firmer. There was no trembling this time. Jennifer met my gaze and for the first time smiled faintly. "We build a case. Financial fraud, misappropriation of inheritance, potential conspiracy to defraud. We'll need statements, evidence, and time. But we can win this. Something shifted inside me. For years I had lived quietly, smoothing over pain, avoiding confrontation, keeping the peace even when it cost me pieces of myself. But this was different. The fire that had flickered inside me for decades suddenly found air. I looked at Marcus. We're not just fighting for what was stolen. We're fighting for what remains. He nodded, tears spilling freely now. I'll do whatever it takes, Mom. Jennifer closed her briefcase. Then, we start now. I'll file an injunction first thing tomorrow. We'll freeze any remaining accounts and notify the investigators. But for tonight, you both need to breathe. When she left, the house fell quiet again. The scent of the sea drifted through the open window. I sat there a long while, listening to the rhythm of the waves, steady, patient, relentless. Marcus leaned against my shoulder. I can't believe I didn't see it, he murmured. Sometimes love blinds us, I said softly. But it also saves us, once we start seeing again. We stayed like that, mother and son, two wounded souls rediscovering strength in the ruins. For the first time in years, I felt the faint pulse of something I thought I had lost hope. Fragile, but real. I looked toward the horizon where the last light of day met the sea, and whispered to myself, they may have taken money, trust, time, but they didn't take me. I'm still here. The dining table became our war room. Papers covered every inch of polished wood-bank statements, photographs, legal documents, a half-eaten sandwich Marcus hadn't touched. The coffee in our cups had gone cold hours ago, but none of us seemed to notice. The ocean murmured through the open window, steady and indifferent. A backdrop to the unraveling of lies and the slow rebuilding of truth. Jennifer sat upright, pen tapping softly against her notepad. Her voice, as always, was calm, but there was a weight behind her words now, a quiet conviction sharpened by empathy. Rebecca committed financial fraud, she said. Patricia is an accessory. We can press criminal charges. Marcus lifted his head, hope flickering briefly across his face. But Jennifer's pause stretched, and I caught it immediately. But? I asked. She sighed, folding her hands. Criminal cases take time and recovery isn't guaranteed. Even if she's convicted, you might never see the money again. Marcus slumped in his chair, running both hands through his hair. The defeat in his posture cut through me. So she gets away with it? He muttered. I didn't say that, Jennifer replied gently. We have options. We can pursue both civil and criminal roots freeze assets, expose the fraud publicly, negotiate restitution, but it will take patience and strategy. Patience. The word pressed against my ribs. I'd lived decades of patience, through grief, through betrayal, through the quiet disappointments of motherhood and marriage. This time, I didn't want patience. I wanted resolve. I've waited my whole life for other people to do the right thing, I said quietly. This time, we'll make sure they do. Jennifer's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. Then we'll start with exposure. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Over the next week, I moved fully into the mansion that had almost been stolen from me. It was mine, now not just on paper, but in spirit. Every room bore traces of Rebecca's short-lived reign, her perfume lingering in the hall. A forgotten scarf tossed on the armchair, a wineglass lip-stained and abandoned on the counter. I kept none of it. I opened every window, let the ocean air sweep through, and began reclaiming each corner. The mornings were quiet, almost sacred. I'd make tea, sit on the terrace overlooking the sea, and write small lists, things to fix, things to forgive, things to let go of. The lists grew shorter each day. Rosa called one evening while I was sorting through papers. Her voice was warm and familiar, like sunlight breaking through a storm. You sound different, Diane, stronger. I feel different, I told her. For the first time in a long while, I'm not just surviving, I'm steering. She laughed softly. There's the Diane, I remember. Marcus visited daily, always bringing something, groceries, coffee, guilt. It clung to him like humidity, heavy and unseen. One afternoon we walked along the beach, our feet sinking into the cool sand. The sea foamed around our ankles, rhythmic and forgiving. You need to stop blaming yourself, I said, watching the horizon. I brought her into your life, he said bitterly. You also brought this house into my life, I countered. You meant to give joy, not pain. You can't control what others choose to do with your kindness. He looked down, his voice cracking. I should have seen who she was. I reached for his arm. Your father used to say, kindness isn't weakness. He'd want you to remember that, and he'd want me to fight. So that's what I'm doing. Fighting for us, for what's right. Marcus nodded, eyes glistening. For a long moment, we just stood there, the sound of the waves filling the space where words could not. On the 9th morning, the phone rang early. Jennifer's voice was brisk, but I could hear the undercurrent of excitement. Diane, you'll want to sit for this. Rebecca's done this before. I felt my chest tighten. Before? Yes. There was an ex-fiancé. His family caught her stealing small amounts at first, then more. They didn't press charges, but I pulled the old records. It's the same pattern. Charm, manipulation, access to money, then disappearance. Did she ever face consequences? I asked. Not yet, Jennifer said, but she might now. A moment later, my phone buzzed. Screenshots filled the screen. Rebecca posing on social media, radiant and false, claiming she and Marcus had just bought a new beach house. My beach house. In every photo, she stood in rooms I recognized, the kitchen where I'd cooked my first meal here, the living room where Marcus had apologized through tears, the terrace overlooking the ocean where I had just begun to breathe again. She's documenting her own fraud, I said, almost laughing from disbelief. Jennifer chuckled softly. It gets better. A producer from Pacific Coast Today saw the posts. They're planning a segment on young couples and their dream homes. They reached out to confirm the story. For a moment, I said nothing. My eyes drifted toward the sea outside the window. The morning light reflected across the water in shimmering gold streaks, like possibility itself. Then, quietly, the pieces began to align in my mind. The lies, the publicity, the reach. Rebecca had always craved attention more than money. She wanted admiration, validation, proof that she had won. What if we gave her exactly what she wanted, just not in the way she expected? I turned to Jennifer. Tell me, I said slowly, how do you feel about putting on a show? Her eyes met mine, and for the first time she grinned. I thought you'd never ask. The next few days were a blur of whispered plans and careful coordination. Jennifer reached out to the show's producer, pretending to represent the homeowner for verification. We knew Rebecca would leap at the chance for exposure, and when she did, every word she said would become evidence recorded, time-stamped, irrefutable. I began rehearsing what I might say if the opportunity arose, how to tell the truth without losing my dignity, how to stand tall in the light after so long hiding in the shadows. At night, I walked through the quiet house, feeling its energy change. It no longer felt haunted by deceit. It felt alive again, as though it recognized the strength returning to its walls. Marcus joined me one evening on the terrace. I still don't know how you're staying so calm, he said. I'm not calm, I admitted. I'm focused. There's a difference. He smiled faintly. Dad would be proud of you. Maybe, I said, looking out at the horizon, but more importantly, I'm proud of me. The tide rolled in, slow and silver under the moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, I could almost feel the storm shifting, the gathering energy of reckoning. Rebecca had taken what she thought she could never lose. Now, she was about to learn what happens when the truth fights back. And for the first time in years, I felt ready not for revenge, but for redemption. The kind that begins not with anger, but with clarity. The kind that ends not in bitterness, but in peace. 3 weeks later, the house had found its rhythm again. The ocean had a softer voice now, its waves rolling in like an old friend who knew every secret but never judged. The air no longer felt heavy with betrayal. It smelled of salt, lemon oil, and faint hope. Each morning, sunlight reached through the windows as if to remind me that truth, no matter how painful, always lets the light back in. Everything was in motion. Jennifer's quiet efficiency and Rachel Kim's discreet brilliance had spun our plan into something sharp and elegant. Rebecca had leapt at the bait exactly as predicted. She'd said yes to the feature without hesitation, delighted at the idea of being filmed as the glamorous co-owner of a newly purchased seaside property. She had no idea that Rachel already knew the truth, that behind the makeup and charm, the house wasn't hers, and the story she was about to tell would unravel her own lies on national television. The segment was set for October 15th. Rebecca believed she was being celebrated as one of the young entrepreneurs and their dream homes. She had no idea that the production had a follow-up feature planned. Community justice, when the real owner steps forward. Marcus looked uneasy when Jennifer told him how it would unfold. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" he asked one evening as we sat on the terrace, the sun melting into the horizon. "It's so public. She'd be humiliated." I looked at him gently. "She humiliated me in private and bragged in public. The least I can do is let the truth walk in daylight." He nodded, though I could see the hesitation behind his eyes. He was good-hearted, too much like his father that way. But I'd learned that sometimes compassion needs a backbone, not a cushion. The days leading up to the filming blurred into quiet preparation. Jennifer rehearsed every legal safeguard. Rachel confirmed every camera angle, and I prepared myself not just outwardly, but inwardly. On the morning before the shoot, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, brushing my hair. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who had walked into this house weeks ago, trembling and unsure. My brown hair, streaked with gray, framed a face lined not just by age, but by endurance. There was a steadiness in my eyes now, a kind of peace that comes only after surviving something meant to destroy you. Clara called that afternoon. Her voice was full of warmth and worry. "Are you okay?" she asked. I smiled softly, holding the phone to my chest before answering. "I'm awake," I said. She paused, then whispered, "That's the best kind of okay." That night, Marcus stayed over. We couldn't sleep, both too wound up, both aware of what tomorrow would bring. We sat together in the living room, the house dim except for the soft light of a single lamp. The ocean outside roared quietly, like an audience waiting for the curtain to rise. He looked at me after a long silence. "Why didn't you ever tell me you didn't like her?" I traced the rim of my teacup with a finger before answering. "Because you deserved your own choices, even the wrong ones." His expression softened, and I saw the boy he used to be, the one who'd sit on my lap with scraped knees and big questions about life and fairness. "I thought I was protecting you," he said, "but you were the one protecting me." "Maybe," I said with a sad smile, "but protection isn't always silence. I know that now." He sighed, leaning back against the couch. "Tomorrow, when she sees you there, she's going to lose it." I smiled faintly, looking out toward the darkness beyond the window where the moon hung like a witness. "I'm counting on it." There was a pause, comfortable, then heavy, then strangely cleansing. Marcus reached over and took my hand. His grip was firm, grounding. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said quietly. The words caught me off guard. I had waited years to hear something like that, not because I needed validation, but because it meant he finally saw me as more than his mother. He saw me as a person who had fought battles unseen, who had endured storms in silence and still found a way to rise. We sat in that soft stillness, surrounded by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant rhythm of the tide. It felt like the calm before a storm, but for once, I wasn't afraid of what was coming. When I went to bed later, I laid out my clothes for the next day, a navy dress. Simple and elegant, the kind my late husband had always said made me look like I could conquer the world without trying. I smiled at the memory. Maybe in some way that was exactly what I was about to do. Sleep came slowly but peacefully. My dreams were not of revenge or triumph, but of freedom. In them, I was walking along the same beach outside my home, barefoot and unburdened. The tide came in, washing away footprints Rebecca's, Patricia's, even my own, and for the first time, I let it. The morning of the shoot arrived crisp and bright. The sea breeze carried a mix of salt and possibility. Jennifer arrived first, her composure impeccable, her eyes sharp but kind. Rachel followed, her camera crew moving with quiet efficiency, setting up in the living room that had once held so much tension. I stood at the top of the stairs, watching them prepare. For a moment, a flicker of doubt crossed my mind. Was I really ready to face Rebecca in front of the world? Then I remembered her words, the ones she'd hissed as she'd been escorted out weeks ago. "You've always been in the way." Maybe I had been. But this time, I wasn't stepping aside. I took one slow breath, feeling the air fill my lungs, anchoring me to the moment. My heart didn't pound with fear, it pulsed with purpose. Jennifer met my eyes and gave a small nod. "You ready?" she asked. "More than ever," I said. Outside, a sleek car pulled into the driveway. The engine shut off. The door opened and laughter spilled into the morning airlight, practiced and false. Rebecca had arrived, camera ready, believing the world was about to applaud her. I turned toward the front door, smoothing the fabric of my dress. My reflection in the glass caught my eye, a woman standing in her truth, not afraid of what might come next. The stage was set. The players were in place. And for the first time in a long while, I felt entirely, powerfully alive. The studio felt smaller than I had imagined, more intimate than glamorous. The lights weren't soft and golden like they appeared on television. They were harsh, humming, and uncomfortably close, making the air almost shimmer. It smelled faintly of coffee, metal, and hairspray. Every voice around me carried an edge of nervous energy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Jennifer and I arrived early through the back entrance, escorted by a quiet production assistant who knew not to ask questions. She led us through narrow hallways lined with framed photos of smiling guests and famous faces. I could almost hear their echoes, people who had once sat under those same lights, pretending everything was fine. Jennifer checked her watch. "We're early," she whispered. "Good. Less room for surprises." Her tone was calm but deliberate. She had done her part, perfectly legal safety nets, prepared statements, coordinated timing with Rachel Kim. But as the moments drew nearer, I could feel the tremor beneath her professionalism. This was more than a legal strategy now. It was a reckoning. At 8:30, Rebecca arrived. I watched her on the monitor from the side room, unseen. She stepped out of a black car, perfectly composed, her hair styled into glossy waves. She wore a tailored white pantsuit that I recognized instantly. It had been charged to one of Marcus's cards during their engagement, a detail he'd confessed to me with shame. Behind her, Patricia and Derek followed, each wearing their own brand of self-importance. Patricia, ever the actress, looked nervous beneath her layer of powder and pearls. Derek, tall and smug, carried himself like he was walking into a victory party. Rebecca flashed her perfect smile at the crew as if she'd been born for the camera. She was good at this, the performance of grace. I had once admired that about her, before I knew what lay beneath. "Showtime," Jennifer murmured. The segment was scheduled to begin at 9:15. The countdown on the studio monitor ticked down, and my heart began to drum in time with it. Rachel's voice came through the speakers, steady, confident, practiced. "Welcome back to Pacific Coast today. This morning, we're speaking with a remarkable young couple living their dream by the sea." The camera panned to Rebecca, sitting elegantly on the couch beside beside the empty space where Marcus would have been had we not planned otherwise. She didn't seem to notice. "Thank you for having me," Rebecca said, her voice honey smooth. "It's been such a blessing to finally settle down in our new home." Rachel smiled politely. "It's beautiful. We saw the pictures you sent." The screen behind them flashed with images. My home, my balcony, my kitchen counter with the marble top Marcus had chosen as a surprise. Even the garden where Rosa and I had planted lilies last spring. The caption read, "Young couple finds coastal bliss." My throat tightened, but I didn't look away. I needed to see it, to witness how boldly she had tried to erase me. Rachel continued, "And your mother-in-law must be thrilled." There was the faintest flicker across Rebecca's expression. Just a blink, but enough to betray the tremor underneath. "Oh yes," she said, forcing a smile. "Diane is very supportive. She's been wonderful." Rachel's tone shifted almost imperceptibly, a small smile curling at the edge of her lips. "I'm glad to hear that," she said, "because we actually have a surprise guest joining us this morning." Rebecca froze. Her fingers, neatly folded on her lap, twitched. For the first time, I saw fear pass through her like a shadow, swift, subtle, but unmistakable. Patricia, seated in the studio audience, leaned forward sharply. "What surprise guest?" She hissed toward the stage manager, but her voice didn't carry far enough to matter. The side door opened. For a brief, surreal moment, the lights seemed brighter and the hum of the cameras louder. I stepped onto the set slowly, each step deliberate, grounding. The audience gasped in unison, a ripple of sound that filled the room like a wave. I wore royal blue, a color that always made me feel centered, calm, untouchable. My heart was pounding, yes, but it was not fear that moved through me. It was something stronger, older, truth finally finding its voice. "Hello, Rebecca," I said gently as I took my seat beside her. "Lovely morning, isn't it?" Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Her skin had drained of color, leaving her face ghostly pale beneath the studio lights. Patricia shot up from her seat in the audience. "What is she doing here?" Rachel turned smoothly, her professionalism never breaking. "She's here," she said, her voice carrying perfectly through the studio, "to share the true story behind this beautiful home." A murmur rippled through the audience. Even the crew members shifted, glancing at one another. Rebecca stammered, I think there's been a misunderstanding." I looked at her calmly, hands folded in my lap. "I don't think so," I said. "You see, I recognize every corner of that house you've been showing. I picked out the tiles myself. The front door still sticks when it rains. And the sea breeze always smells of rosemary from the garden." Rebecca blinked, her breath catching audibly through the mic. "Diane, this isn't," Rachel interjected, her tone firm but polite. "Let's clarify for our viewers. Mrs. Collins, this home was a gift from your son, correct?" "Yes," I said. "For my 60th birthday. It was meant to be my retirement place. A home by the sea." I turned slightly toward Rebecca, my voice soft but steady, until someone decided to claim it as her own. Patricia began to protest from the audience, but Rachel raised a hand gently. "Please," she said, "you'll have a chance to speak shortly." The tension in the room was electric. Rebecca's composure crumbled by degrees. First, the faltering smile, then the tremor in her hands, then the tears that welled but never fell. I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in her unraveling, only a quiet sadness. Because beneath it all, I saw what she was. Someone so desperate to be seen as successful, loved, important, that she built her life out of lies. Rachel guided the conversation with grace, revealing details that had been verified: the financial records, the social media posts, the previous incident with the ex-fiancé's family. The audience's silence grew heavy, almost reverent. By the time the segment ended, Rebecca wasn't speaking anymore. Patricia's expression had hardened into something unrecognizable, and Derek stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Rachel closed with a quiet statement: "Sometimes, the truth has its own timing, and when it arrives, it doesn't ask for permission." The lights dimmed. The cameras stopped. A single tear slipped down Rebecca's cheek, and for a brief moment, I almost pitied her. Jennifer approached me, her hand brushing mine. "You did it," she whispered. I exhaled, feeling something leave my body. A shadow, an ache I had carried too long. As I stepped outside, the morning air felt cold against my skin, but it was cleansing. The sky was pale and wide, and the ocean was visible in the distance. Marcus was waiting near the car. When he saw me, he opened his arms. For a long time, I just stood there, breathing him in, letting the world settle around us. "It's over," he said quietly. "No," I murmured, looking out toward the horizon. "It's just beginning." Rachel's hand was steady as she lifted the papers from the table. The light above the set caught the gold lettering of the seal, and for a moment I saw my own name clear. Unapologetic and undeniably mine. "The deed," she announced, her voice firm but calm, "lists ownership under Diane Collins." She turned it toward the cameras so everyone could see. My name stood out in bold black letters against the white page. The truth at last had a voice of its own. Rebecca's breath hitched, and she lurched forward. "This is a setup," she cried, her voice shrill, cracking under the weight of the moment. "Marcus, if you're watching, he's here," I said softly. The studio doors opened, and Marcus stepped in. For a heartbeat, he looked like a boy again lost, bruised by truth. The audience fell silent, the cameras panning toward him as he crossed the floor. Rebecca's hand shot out, desperate to grab him, to anchor herself to the lie she had built. He stepped back. "Don't touch me," he said, voice low but steady. Rebecca froze, hands suspended midair. The lights above us hummed faintly, and for a moment even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Rachel guided the conversation with poise, as though she knew she was holding something sacred and volatile at once. "Mrs. Collins," she said, turning toward me gently, "would you please explain how this began?" I drew in a breath. The studio smelled faintly of ozone and nerve-sharp and human. My voice came out calm, deliberate. "The house was a birthday gift," I said. "My son bought it for my 60th. But when I arrived, I found Rebecca and her family already living there. They told me to leave." A low murmur rippled through the audience, shock, disbelief, anger. Rebecca's head snapped toward the crowd, eyes wide and glistening. "That's not true! She's twisting everything." Rachel raised a hand gently but firmly. "Let's allow everyone to be heard." Jennifer rose from her seat among the audience, her posture precise, every movement controlled. "We've brought documented evidence," she said. She held up a tablet and gestured toward the studio screens. Instantly, the images changed. Rebecca's smiling face, the beach house behind her, captions flashing across the screen. "My dream home finally come true. So grateful for OUR place by the sea." The audience's murmurs grew louder. I saw a woman in the front row cover her mouth, another shake her head in disbelief. Rebecca's voice cracked. "That was for social media?" "Everyone exaggerates online." Rachel turned slightly, her tone still calm, but her eyes sharper now. "It appears you made these posts while the legal owner, Mrs. Collins, was unaware that you and your family were occupying her property." Rebecca's jaw trembled. "You don't understand," she cried. Marcus said, "He said it was for us." That we were building a future together. Marcus's expression tightened. I said I bought a house for my mother, he corrected, his voice breaking slightly. You never listened, Rebecca. You only heard what you wanted. The silence that followed was painful, raw, suspended. I could hear someone in the audience sniff quietly. Rachel, ever professional, turned a page in her notes. It seems there's more to this story, she said, glancing toward Jennifer. We've received information about missing funds connected to the couple's joint accounts. Would you like to address that? Jennifer nodded and approached the table. Her movements were calm, surgical. A total of $180,000, she said, was transferred over the last 2 years to an account under Patricia Reynolds, Rebecca's mother. Those funds were later traced to a fraudulent timeshare scheme currently under federal investigation. The sound of collective gasping filled the room like wind through trees. Patricia, sitting rigid in the audience, went pale. We didn't know, she said quickly, her hands clutching her purse. It was just an investment opportunity, Rebecca said. Stop, Rebecca snapped, glaring at her mother. The last shred of control was slipping through her fingers. Her tears had dried now, her face hard and desperate. Don't throw me under the bus, Mom. Rachel glanced between them, her tone quiet but firm. These are serious accusations. Is there anything you want to say, Mrs. Collins? I looked at Rebecca, at the woman who had once sat across my dinner table smiling like family. I don't hate you, I said softly. I never did. But you tried to destroy the only real family you ever had. You could have had love. You chose greed instead. Rebecca shook her head wildly, eyes shining with something sharp, fear, maybe, or pride refusing to die. Do you think you're perfect, Diane? She spat. You've always acted like some saint, but you're not. Tell him, she said, turning on me suddenly, her voice venomous. Tell him about the life insurance. The studio fell silent. Every camera froze. Rachel blinked, momentarily caught off guard. I'm sorry, she said carefully. What are you referring to? Rebecca smiled, then a bitter, trembling smile that looked more like pain. She didn't tell you? There's a life insurance policy. A big one. Marcus is the beneficiary. She made sure he'd never struggle again. Maybe she thought she could buy his love, or maybe she just wanted to make sure her ghost was worth more than her presence. For a heartbeat, the world tilted. My pulse roared in my ears, but I didn't look away. Yes, I said quietly. I took that policy out years ago, after my husband died. To protect my son if anything ever happened to me. I turned to Marcus. It was never about control. It was about love. Rebecca's smirk faltered. The air in the studio shifted. Something intangible broke. Marcus stepped forward slowly, his eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. You still don't get it, he said to Rebecca. Love isn't a transaction. You use people until there's nothing left to take. She turned toward him, pleading now, her voice softer but hollow. Marcus, please. We can fix this. I can fix this. He shook his head. No, you've broken enough. The audience remained utterly silent, as though witnessing something sacred and painful all at once. Rachel exhaled, closing her notebook slowly. Her voice softened. Sometimes the truth isn't what we want to hear, she said, but it frees us anyway. Rebecca sank into her seat, the light gone from her face. Patricia covered her eyes. Derek slumped beside her. The cameras captured it all, the final image of a family built on deceit unraveling under the weight of exposure. I felt no triumph, only release. Like a tide drawing back after a storm. Marcus walked toward me and took my hand, his fingers trembling. The lights above us softened. The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then stronger less for spectacle, more for the quiet courage it took to stand there. As the cameras faded out, I looked toward the audience, faces of strangers, some tearful, some smiling faintly, and realized something profound. This wasn't just the end of a lie. It was the beginning of truth. When we stepped outside, the sunlight was sharp and golden. The air smelled of salt and new beginnings. Marcus stood beside me, his shoulders heavy but his eyes clear. "Mom," he whispered, voice raw. "Thank you." I smiled faintly. "No, my son," I said, squeezing his hand. "Thank yourself. You finally saw." My hands trembled, though I tried to hide it beneath the weight of composure I had carried my whole life. The studio lights suddenly seemed too bright, pressing against my skin like heat. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow, deliberate, as if the universe itself was counting. "What are you talking about?" I asked quietly, though every part of me already knew what was coming. Rebecca's smirk returned, that cold, brittle smile she wore like armor when cornered. "Don't act surprised, Diane," she said, her voice trembling with both rage and satisfaction. "I found it. A $500,000 life insurance policy with Marcus listed as beneficiary. Taken out just 6 months ago, right after your diagnosis." The words hit harder than any slap could have. The air left my lungs. Marcus turned to me, confusion and fear swirling in his eyes. "Mom?" he whispered. For a moment, the noise of the room, the cameras, the murmuring crowd, the hum of the lights, all fell away. All I could hear was my own breathing, steady but shallow. I closed my eyes. "I was going to tell you after your birthday," I said softly. "I didn't want to ruin it." He took a step closer, voice cracking. "Tell me what?" The silence stretched thin between us, and then I let it go, the secret I had been holding in my chest like glass. "I have stage 3 ovarian cancer," I said. 4 months into treatment. Gasps erupted from the audience, echoing through the studio like a physical sound wave. Some people covered their mouths. Others turned to one another, whispering. Rachel's hand flew to her chest. Rebecca blinked, and for a moment, even she looked unsure. But then her face twisted, desperate to reclaim control, to make cruelty her refuge. "So she's dying anyway," she shouted. "What's the point of any of this?" Rachel's voice cut sharp through the chaos. "Enough." Her tone held authority that silenced even the hum of the equipment. The audience went still. Marcus's chair scraped against the floor as he stood, his face red, trembling with fury. "You found out," he said, his voice breaking, "and you tried to profit from it?" Rebecca's confidence faltered. "No, baby, don't call me that." His voice was louder now, jagged and trembling. "You used my mother's sickness to plan a payday? You went through her private papers, her records. She's lying." Patricia shouted weakly from the audience, but her voice no longer carried any conviction. Marcus turned toward the security team, his voice low but lethal. "Get them out." Rebecca's protest turned to shrieks as security moved in. Patricia followed, clutching Derek's arm, their voices blending into one desperate, fading argument. The audience's silence was deafening. All that remained was the echo of the door closing behind them. The cameras stopped rolling. The red light above the lens blinked off. For the first time all morning, the world exhaled. Marcus turned back to me, and his face crumbled. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, voice barely a whisper. I reached for his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm, the slight tremor in his fingers. "Because protecting you," I said gently, "is what mothers do." He shook his head, tears falling freely now. "You've been sitting through chemo, pretending everything was fine. I wanted you to have peace," I said. "You've been through so much already. I didn't want this to be one more burden to carry." He knelt beside me, head pressed against my shoulder. "You're not a burden," he said through broken sobs. "You're the only reason I've ever made it through anything." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The crew gave us space. Even Rachel, who had seen hundreds of stories unravel live on air, stood back, her eyes wet. When I finally spoke again, it was a whisper. "With treatment, I might have years," I said. "Maybe more." The doctors don't know for sure. He pulled back enough to look at me, his eyes shining. Then we'll make every day count. Those words, so simple, yet so alive, felt like sunlight cutting through fog. Jennifer approached quietly from the side, the sound of her heels soft against the floor. She hesitated, her usual composure shaken by the moment. "I'm so sorry to intrude," she said, her voice gentle, almost reverent. "But there's something you need to see." I wiped my eyes and nodded. "Go ahead." She reached into her briefcase and handed me a folder. Her hands didn't tremble, but her expression did. "The civil case is moving forward," she said carefully. "But there's something else." The folder felt heavy in my hands. I opened it, and as I read the first page, the ground beneath me seemed to shift. The words blurred for a moment, and I had to steady myself. It was a financial statement, treasoned, official, undeniable. My late husband's pension fund. For years I had assumed it was gone, that he'd cashed it out before his death. But there it was. Transfers, deposits, a chain of signatures that didn't match. Jennifer pointed to one line. "This," she said, "was signed 3 months after your husband's death. The account was moved to a trust under another name." I blinked, stunned. "That's impossible." "It's not impossible," she said softly. "It's forgery." The room tilted slightly. My fingers dug into the folder. I looked up at her, my voice barely audible. "Who?" Jennifer hesitated. "We traced it back to someone working with the same firm that handled your son's accounts. The paper trail leads to Patricia's contact. It looks like your late husband's pension was stolen long before any of this began." Marcus's face drained of color. "They've been circling us for years," he said quietly. "This didn't start with Rebecca. It started with her mother." A hollow silence filled the room. Rachel, who had stayed near the cameras, took a step forward. "You don't have to continue this now," she said softly. "We can pause." But I shook my head. "No," I said. "The truth doesn't wait." I looked at Marcus, my voice steady again, the tremor gone. "They took your father's legacy, but they won't take ours." He nodded, his jaws set, eyes red but resolute. Jennifer closed the folder gently. "We'll recover what was stolen," she said. "Every dollar, every document. But Diane, this time, it's not just about justice. It's about closure." I looked down at the folder in my hands, at the tangled proof of betrayal that had spanned years, and felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there, yes, but beneath it, there was a quiet flame of resolve. The past had taken enough. It was time to build something new, something clean, even if it began from ashes. When we finally stepped outside into the sunlight again, Marcus wrapped an arm around my shoulders. I could feel his heartbeat steady against mine. "I don't want to waste another second," he said. I smiled faintly, lifting my face to the sky. "Then let's not," I whispered. The horizon stretched before us, wide, salt-bright, and endless, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't see an ending. I saw possibility. "And can't be right," I whispered, my fingers trembling as I held the document. The paper crackled softly, betraying my shaking hands. I read the same line again and again, hoping the words would change, that I had somehow misread them. But they didn't. They just sat there, sharp and merciless. Jennifer's voice broke through my disbelief. "It's a title deed," she said gently, as if easing me toward the truth. "To your old house, the one you've been renting for 15 years since your husband passed." Marcus frowned, stepping closer. "What?" Jennifer inhaled slowly, her expression filled with both sorrow and controlled anger. "Patricia bought it 6 months ago through an LLC. She's been collecting your rent ever since, and planning to evict you." For a moment, the words didn't reach me. They hovered in the air like smoke, thick and unreal. Then they landed, hard. My chest tightened. My old house. The home where Marcus took his first steps, where my husband and I used to dance barefoot in the kitchen on quiet Sunday mornings. The house that had held every echo of our laughter and every whisper of our grief. She was going to make me homeless, I said, my voice breaking, and wait for me to die. Jennifer hesitated, her gaze dropping to the papers in her hands. There's more, she said softly. Emails with a contractor, plans to renovate and flip the property for a $380,000 profit once you were gone. I sat down slowly, as though the weight of betrayal itself had pushed me into the chair. The room spun for a moment, then steadied. I thought of Patricia's voice, that saccharine tone she used when she called me dear, and how she'd always insisted she wanted to help with the finances. All the while, she had been helping herself. The betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about trust, the quiet kind that builds over years, the kind that feels safe until it shatters. Marcus stood behind me, his hand resting on my shoulder, grounding me. "Mom," he whispered, "we'll fix this." I met Jennifer's eyes. There was steel in my voice now, the same steel I had rediscovered in the last few days. Options? Jennifer straightened a little, relieved to see I wasn't collapsing, that something inside me had turned from pain into resolve. She purchased the property using stolen funds, which means it's a fraudulent transfer, she explained. We can challenge the deed and file to impose a constructive trust. Essentially, it reverts ownership to you once we prove the money was illicit. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. And the mansion? Jennifer's lips curved in a faint, reassuring smile. It's yours, free and clear. It was bought with premarital assets only. No one can contest that. Relief mingled with the ache in my chest. The mansion that had once felt like a curse, the setting of humiliation and deceit, now felt like a symbol of survival. Jennifer continued, her tone shifting slightly. Also, after the broadcast, 3 other women reached out to my office. Each one claims Rebecca scammed them, too. Similar lies, false investments, emotional manipulation. If they agree, we can coordinate their cases and support a criminal investigation. The words hung between us like the first light after a storm. The puzzle pieces were aligning, the truth finally stepping into the open. Marcus walked to the window, his reflection caught against the glass, the ocean stretching endlessly behind him. The waves shimmered in the afternoon light, patient and eternal. "What do you want to do, Mom?" he asked quietly, still staring out at the horizon. His voice carried something different now, not just pain, but respect. As if he was finally seeing me, not as someone fragile or fading, but as someone who had endured. I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the cruelty, the theft of years and peace. I thought about the woman I used to be, always choosing silence, always trying to keep the peace. That woman had been kind, but also afraid. Now, the fear was gone. "I want justice," I said finally. My voice didn't shake. "Not revenge. Justice." Jennifer nodded. Then we pressed charges. Fraud, theft, conspiracy. They'll face all of it. I'll file immediately. Marcus turned from the window, his eyes shining with something between pride and sorrow. "You sure you want to go through all that?" "Yes," I said softly. "Because this isn't just about me anymore. It's about truth. It's about ending what they started." For a while the room was quiet. Only the rhythmic crash of the waves against the shore broke the silence. Outside, the sky was turning that delicate shade of gold that only came at the end of a long, hard day. I stood, slowly, feeling the weight of the past lift just a little. "They took enough," I murmured. "It ends here." Marcus nodded, walking over to wrap his arms around me. "I'll be with you through all of it," he said. "Every court date, every step. We'll see it through." I smiled faintly, resting my head against his shoulder. "You already are, sweetheart. You're the reason I'm still standing." Jennifer closed her briefcase quietly and looked at us. "You've both been through hell," she said softly. But sometimes, justice isn't just about punishment. It's about peace. As she left, I moved toward the open balcony doors. The ocean air drifted in, cool and clean, filling the room with salt and light. I stepped outside, barefoot on the cold tiles, and let the wind brush against my face. For a long while I stood there, watching the horizon, watching the place where the sky and sea seemed to touch. The world felt vast again, full of unfinished stories. Behind me, Marcus joined me, his hand finding mine. "You know," he said quietly, "Dad used to say, the ocean never forgets, but it forgives in waves." I smiled at that. "Then maybe forgiveness is what comes next," I said. "Not for them, for me." He squeezed my hand. "I think he'd be proud of you." Tears slipped down my cheeks, not from grief this time, but from release. The kind that comes when you stop fighting the current and let it carry you somewhere new. "I used to think healing meant forgetting," I said softly. "But maybe it just means learning to live alongside the pain until it becomes something else." Marcus looked at me, his eyes the same shade as his father's. "Until it becomes strength." "Yes," I said. "Exactly that." The last of the sun dipped into the sea and the waves glowed for a heartbeat before darkness reclaimed them. It wasn't an ending, it was a continuation, the quiet promise that life, no matter how bruised, still moves forward. And as I stood there, the world fading into twilight, I realized something simple but profound. Justice might come through the courts, but peace that came from within. It was time to begin again. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse, the air sharp with the quiet hum of anticipation. I wore a lavender suit, lavender for cancer awareness, but also because it symbolized resilience, the gentle kind that endures. My body had changed, yes. I was lighter, slower, but I was here. I was alive. And the latest scans had shown what I once thought impossible. The tumor had shrunk. I'd lived long enough to see this day, to stand not as a victim, but as a witness to my own restoration. Marcus sat right behind me, his hand occasionally brushing the back of my chair, a silent promise that I wasn't alone. Beside him was Jennifer's Tedfast, composed. Her briefcase neatly organized even in the chaos of Trial-land 3 women whose faces had become familiar. Sarah, Monica, and Jade. They were survivors too, of Rebecca's lies and manipulations, and in some way, we had become a small, unexpected family. Across the room sat Rebecca and Patricia. Gone were their expensive clothes and flawless smiles. Their faces looked drawn, drained of arrogance. I studied them not with hatred, but with a quiet, tired recognition. They had already lost more than they understood. Their masks, their control, the illusion that cruelty could be hidden behind charm. The trial had lasted 2 long weeks. Every day felt like reopening an old wound, but also like cleaning it, painful, necessary, healing. Derek, shaky and pale, took a plea deal early on and testified against them. When his trembling voice described how Rebecca had boasted about playing the long game, I watched her turn her face away. There was no power left in her defiance. When the jury filed back into the courtroom, my pulse thundered in my ears. Time seemed to fold in on itself, years of deceit, fear, humiliation, all funneling into this single moment. The foreman stood, reading each verdict with clear, deliberate precision. On the count of wire fraud, guilty. On the count of identity theft, guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. Each word landed like a note of release. With every guilty, I felt the weight I'd carried for so long, the ache in my bones. The nights I'd spent questioning my worth begin to lift. Rebecca's head dropped into her hands. Patricia sat stiffly beside her, the color draining from her face as the reality of consequence settled in. The judge's voice filled the room, calm but heavy with judgment, targeting a woman undergoing cancer treatment, planning to make her homeless, and stealing from her own family. This reaches a rare level of depravity. Patricia received 8 years in federal prison. Rebecca, 6, with mandatory psychological evaluation and full restitution ordered. The courtroom was silent except for the quiet scribble of reporters' pens. When the bailiff moved to escort them away, Rebecca turned once more to look at me. Her eyes were red, almost pleading. I held her gaze without hatred, but also without forgiveness. Some things didn't need closure, they needed distance. Outside, sunlight flooded the courthouse steps. Cameras flashed. Microphones extended toward me, voices overlapping. "Diane, how do you feel? What message do you have for other victims?" I lifted my chin and spoke clearly, not as someone broken, but as someone reborn. "Justice isn't revenge," I said. "It's accountability, and kindness isn't weakness." The crowd quieted. For the first time in months, I walked away without looking back. That evening, on the mansion's deck, the ocean spread out before us, vast, forgiving. Marcus stood beside me, the wind ruffling his hair, a smile beginning to form at the corner of his mouth. "The court reversed Patricia's fraudulent purchase," he said. "The old house? It's yours again." I looked out at the horizon. The sea was deep blue, endless, like a promise renewed. "I'm donating it," I said, "to the foundation. Housing for cancer patients who can't afford to travel for treatment." He blinked, surprised. Then he smiled, tears glimmering in his eyes. "Dad would have loved that." I reached for his hand. "He would have loved you," I said softly. "You stood by me when it mattered most." That night, messages flooded my phone calls, emails, letters from strangers who'd watched the trial unfold on the news. Rosa wrote, "When are we celebrating, Diane? You did it." I looked at Marcus, at the gentle hum of waves against the shore, at the home that had once symbolized betrayal and now felt like rebirth. "Let's throw a party," I said, "not for the trial, for survival." 3 weeks later, laughter filled the house. The air buzzed with music, clinking glasses, and the murmur of stories shared between people who had suffered and healed in their own ways. The women from court were there: Sarah, Monica, and Jade, each of them glowing in their newfound peace. Rachel, the producer who'd helped bring the truth to light, stood near the window, smiling when our eyes met. I wore an emerald green dress that shimmered as I moved, a color of life, of healing. Clara found me by the buffet table, her face full of warmth. "You look radiant," she said. "Is the treatment still working?" "The treatment," I said, smiling. "The victory. The peace. All of it." As the sun began to sink into the horizon, I lifted a glass. The conversations hushed, and everyone turned toward me. "It's never too late," I said, my voice carrying softly over the ocean breeze. "Never too late to stand up, to say enough, to be good without being silent." "To Diane," they called back, their voices rising like a wave. The sound washed over me, filling me with something pure, a quiet joy that had no name but felt like freedom. Later, when the party had faded and the stars shimmered above the calm sea, Marcus found me on the beach. The night air was cool, and the world felt still. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, his voice tender. I looked up at the sky, then at him. "Better than okay," I said. "I'm alive." He wrapped an arm around me, and for a moment, I felt the same comfort I used to give him as a child. The circle complete, the balance restored. Weeks later, the doctors confirmed what I'd scarcely dared to hope for: remission. The cancer that had once felt like a countdown was now a quiet scar, a reminder but no longer a threat. Rebecca and Patricia faced their sentences, years to reflect, years to understand what they had done. I didn't think of them often. My life had expanded beyond their shadow. I filled the house with art, laughter, and the scent of baking bread. I took long walks by the sea, sometimes barefoot, sometimes humming to myself. I started painting again soft colors, ocean tones, beginnings rather than endings. I had been through fire and loss, betrayal and illness, and yet I had emerged whole. Not untouched, but unbroken. The mansion glowed softly against the night, full of warmth and music, like a heartbeat restored. This was my happy ending and my powerful new beginning. If my story touched you, if you found strength or hope in these words, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. There are more stories here of resilience, of rebirth, of people who discover that even after the darkest storm, light always returns.